my daughter's 18th birthday, I spent months restoring old videotapes of her late mother. But the night before I finished them, my wife threw every single one into the trash. On purpose. She said I needed to move on. What she didn't know was I had already started, and I was going to make sure my daughter knew exactly what kind of woman her stepmother really was. They say grief doesn't just fade, it burrows deep, curls up inside your rib cage, and makes itself a permanent resident. I learned that the hard way, and just when I thought I'd finally made peace with it, the person I trusted most did something so quietly cruel, so unfathomably selfish, that I still struggle to say it out loud. It started on a quiet Tuesday evening in early September. The kind of evening where the air turns crisp and smells like endings, burning leaves, fading daylight, and memories you try not to chase. I had spent most of that day in the attic, digging through boxes I hadn't opened in nearly a decade, dusty old tapes, home videos, dozens of them, wrapped in labeled cases with dates I barely remembered writing. Alina's first steps. Beach Day, 2009. Our last Christmas. Alina was my late wife. She died 12 years ago in a car accident. I was 30, she was 29. And our daughter, Sophie, she was barely 6. One moment, we were planning her 7th birthday. The next, I was planning a funeral. There's no manual for that kind of thing. You just survive. Now, I'm 42. My name is Daniel, and I've spent the last 12 years learning how to carry my grief without letting it drown me. I met Wendy when Sophie was 10. She was kind, patient, and for a while, it felt like maybe the world wasn't completely cruel after all. We married when Sophie turned 12. Wendy became a good stepmother. Or at least, I thought she was trying to be. But there was always tension, quiet resentment. She never liked hearing Alina's name. She never asked about the past, and I never forced her to. But that September evening, I decided I was going to do something special. Sophie's 18th birthday was coming up in 3 weeks. I had this idea, this gift that would mean more than anything money could buy. I was going to digitize the tapes and make a documentary-style video for her, a tribute, a time capsule, a gift from her mother, from the years she barely remembered. As I carried the box down from the attic, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I spent hours that night cataloging the tapes, smiling through tears as I watched grainy footage of Alina chasing Sophie through sprinklers, kissing scraped knees, singing lullabies off-key. It was like watching ghosts that didn't know they were gone. Wendy walked in while I was rewinding one of the tapes. She stood there quietly, arms crossed, staring at the flickering screen. I remember the way her eyes narrowed, not in curiosity but in something colder, something sharper. "You're watching those again?" she asked, like I'd been caught sneaking cigarettes. I nodded. "It's for Sophie. I'm putting together something for her birthday. These are all the old tapes." Wendy didn't say anything. She just walked out of the room. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it was just awkward for her, watching me relive a life I had before her. But there was something in the air that night, a shift. I felt it in my bones, even as I ignored it. The kind of unease that creeps up your spine when you're being watched. I told myself I was overthinking, that Wendy just needed time. I went to bed that night with the tapes still on the coffee table, stacked neatly, waiting to be transferred the next day, but when I woke up, they were gone. And so was the woman I thought I knew. I searched the house like a madman, every drawer, every closet, under the couch cushions, in the trash bins, even outside where the garbage can sat waiting for pickup. The tapes were gone, not misplaced, not moved, gone. I stood in the living room, heart pounding in my ears, staring at the empty space on the table where they'd been the night before. It felt like standing over a fresh grave. Something had been buried, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. Wendy came downstairs 15 minutes later, dressed for work, holding a cup of coffee like it was just another morning. I asked her straight out, "Did you see the tapes?" She didn't even blink. "I threw them away," she said, as casually as if she were talking about spoiled milk. "You don't need to keep torturing yourself with that stuff, Daniel." I couldn't breathe. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. My body just froze. "You what?" Her voice didn't waver. "I threw them away, all of them. You said you were up all night watching them, and honestly, it's not healthy. It's time to let go." I didn't respond, couldn't. My hands were shaking. I walked past her, out the front door, and down the driveway barefoot. I tore open the trash bin, empty. Garbage pickup had come at 6 a.m. She had timed it perfectly. All that remained of my first wife, of Sophie's mother, was gone. That afternoon, I didn't speak. I couldn't. I sat in my car, engine off, keys in hand, and stared through the windshield for what felt like hours. I wasn't mourning the tapes. I was mourning something deeper, the knowledge that the woman I married could erase someone from existence, and not even flinch. When I finally came back inside, Wendy was in the kitchen. She looked up like nothing had happened. "You're mad," she said. "But you'll see one day it was the right thing. You've been living in the past too long, and it's poisoning us." "Those weren't just videos," I said. My voice was low. "They were her. They were Sophie's mother." Wendy sighed. "I'll never compare to her. I've always known that. So what's the point in you holding on?" That sentence broke something in me. Because it wasn't about Alina, it was about control. It was about jealousy disguised as caretaking. And it was about Wendy deciding that my grief, my history, was an inconvenience. The thing is, I had loved Wendy. I had made space for her in my life, in my daughter's life, and in the tangled knot of grief that we'd learned to live around. But in her eyes, that space wasn't enough. She didn't want to coexist with my past. She wanted to replace it. Later that night, she came to me, softer this time, apologizing, saying she acted impulsively, that she didn't mean to hurt me, she just wanted to help me move on. She even cried, but her eyes never did. I looked at her and realized I didn't know who this woman was, and worse, I didn't know how long she'd been hiding behind a mask of understanding, maybe since the beginning. That night, I slept in the guest room. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand. Not out of dramatics, but because something had shifted inside me. Something final. For days, she tried to reach me. Texts, notes on the bathroom mirror, breakfasts left untouched on the kitchen counter. But I stayed silent. People kept telling me it was just grief, that she made a mistake, that I should try to understand, that everyone grieves differently. But none of them understood what she'd really done. She hadn't just thrown away old videos. She had thrown away my daughter's last memories of her mother. She had made herself judge and executioner of a past she had no right to touch. And once someone shows you they're capable of erasing the dead, it's hard to ever trust them with the living. I didn't talk to Wendy for 3 days, not out of spite, not as punishment, I just couldn't. Something inside me had caved in. The silence wasn't rage, it was survival. It was the only way I could hold myself together without saying something I couldn't take back. And still, she hovered, leaving food by the door. Slipping in late at night to whisper apologies I pretended to sleep through. Touching my shoulder in a passing. Like maybe she could press undo if she just acted like nothing happened. But the damage wasn't something you could just sweep up and forget. This wasn't an argument. This was a fracture, a theft. The fourth night, I sat in the garage for hours, staring at the empty tape box she hadn't bothered to throw away. That somehow felt worse, like a hollowed-out casket, a final mockery of everything she'd taken. I opened it just to be sure. Still empty. All that was left were a few dust flecks and one cracked plastic case, labeled Alina's birthday, 2010. No tape inside. That's when it hit me. Wendy hadn't just thrown them away. She'd gone through them. She had taken the time to open each case, read the labels, and make a decision. Tape by tape. Memory by memory. Like an executioner choosing which prisoner dies next. And I pictured her, maybe in the early hours of the morning, crouched over the trash can, dropping each cassette into a black plastic bag. Calm, focused, justified. I wanted to vomit. A few days later, she cornered me in the hallway. "I know you're hurting," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "But we can't go on like this. I made a mistake. I get it. But you're punishing me for something I did because I love you." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. And something shifted in her eyes then, something colder. She wasn't used to being ignored. Wendy was the kind of person who could admit to flaws as long as she got forgiveness in return. But silence? That was a different kind of rejection. So she escalated. That weekend, she called my sister behind my back, told her I was spiraling, that I was obsessing over Alina again, and she didn't know how to help me. She framed it as concern, of course, but the intention was clear. Plant the seed that I was unstable, that she was the reasonable one. I found out from my sister, who called me in a panic. "What's going on, Daniel? Are you okay? Wendy says you're not eating, that you've been locking yourself away. Are you thinking about hurting yourself?" That was the moment the anger hit me. Not the rage of a man scorned, but the righteous fury of someone whose truth was being rewritten. She hadn't just tried to erase my past. Now, she was trying to discredit my present, one narrative at a time. I walked into the living room that night and told her flatly, "Don't ever talk to my family about me again. Don't frame me as some grieving lunatic to cover up what you did." She flinched, but only for a second. "You're being irrational, Daniel," she said. "This is exactly why I did what I did. You can't let go. You're stuck in a life that ended over a decade ago. And you're stuck competing with a woman who died," I said. "And somehow, you're still losing." That landed like a slap. Her mouth opened, then closed. She walked away. I heard the bedroom door slam, but it didn't matter anymore. I sat down at my laptop. Not to argue, not to rage post, but to try and rebuild. If the tapes were gone, maybe, just maybe, the files weren't. I had digitized a few of them years ago, during a short-lived attempt to back everything up to DVD. It hadn't gone far, but I remembered using an external hard drive, one I hadn't touched in years. I tore the house apart until I found it. Covered in dust, hidden behind old tax documents in a storage box. I plugged it in and prayed. And there they were. 4 files, grainy, cropped, but real. Alina singing to Sophie in the bathtub. Her voice cracking, off-key, laughing. Alina helping Sophie blow out candles. Alina looking into the camera, at me, and saying, "I hope she remembers this day forever." I sat there, headphones on, hunched over the laptop, and cried so hard my chest hurt. It wasn't just grief, it was relief. It was proof. That Wendy hadn't erased everything. That Alina still existed, even if only in pixels and sound waves. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up stitching the footage together, one trembling clip at a time. I had no grand plan yet, no strategy, just instinct. But deep down, I knew something had changed. This wouldn't be about yelling or punishing or storming out. If Wendy had declared war on my past, I would reclaim it, piece by piece, quietly, strategically, without mercy. After I found the files, I didn't tell anyone, not Wendy, not my daughter, not even my sister. I kept it to myself, not out of secrecy, but out of protection. I knew the moment I said anything, Wendy would try to spin it, make it about how I was digging up the past again, how I was feeding my obsession. So I stayed quiet. It became a ritual. Every night, after everyone had gone to bed, I'd slip into the home office, headphones on, lights off, and edit, clip by clip, frame by frame. Some videos were damaged, corrupted. Others were filled with static or cut out halfway through. But I didn't care. I treated every second of footage like it was sacred, like I was resurrecting something the world had tried to bury. And in a way, I was. It was strange, watching Alina on screen again. Not in my memory, but in motion, laughing, dancing, alive. And the more I watched, the more I remembered things I didn't even know I'd forgotten. The way she used to braid Sophie's hair in silence before school. How she'd kiss her forehead twice. Always twice. The way she looked at me through the lens. Like I was the only man in the world. It didn't hurt anymore. It centered me. And it reminded me why I was doing this, not for vengeance, not to spite Wendy, but for Sophie. Because Sophie had no idea what had been taken from her. She thought the tapes were still safe somewhere. She didn't know they'd been destroyed in an act of possessive jealousy by the woman she called Mom for the last 6 years. And I didn't know how, or even if, I was going to tell her. But I did know one thing. I would give her back what I could, and I would never let anyone erase her mother again. Wendy, meanwhile, shifted tactics. The silent treatment didn't work, so she moved into apology mode again. She left handwritten notes by the coffee maker, bought my favorite snacks, suggested therapy for both of us. She was trying to reset the chessboard, hoping I'd make the first move toward reconciliation, but I wasn't playing her game anymore. I was building something else, something stronger than apologies, something permanent. I rented a safe deposit box downtown, put the hard drive inside, made a backup copy and stored it in cloud storage under a new private email address. I emailed the password to myself under an innocuous subject line, grocery list. And I printed one photo, a still frame of Alina holding baby Sophie in her lap, their foreheads pressed together, smiling with their eyes closed. I placed it inside a sealed envelope with a note. For Sophie, when she's ready. Then I locked it in the deposit box too. I didn't know exactly when I'd give it to her, but I knew I would. And I wanted it to survive anything. Even Wendy. In public, I went back to pretending things were normal. At work, I smiled, took meetings, made jokes. At home, I sat at dinner. Answered her questions with quiet civility. Responded to her touch with polite stillness. Nothing overt, nothing aggressive, just nothing. And that nothing began to scare her. I could see it in her eyes. She'd miscalculated. She'd expected a storm, a dramatic fight, maybe even divorce papers. She could have prepared for that. She could have explained that to others. Painted herself the victim of my unresolved grief. But instead she got silence. Calm, intentional, unnerving silence. And it drove her mad. She started trying harder, getting dressed up for dinner, buying wine we never drank, offering to help with things I'd already done, and beneath all of it I could feel the desperation, the need to be let back in, to reclaim control. to rewrite the narrative before it slipped too far. But she was too late, because I wasn't hers anymore. I was his again, the man who had loved once, lost everything, and learned to rebuild from ashes. And this time, I wasn't rebuilding for myself. I was rebuilding for my daughter, for her truth, for her memories, and for the justice that comes not from revenge, but from restoration. Sophie's birthday was exactly 2 weeks away. She was turning 18, a milestone, a coming of age, and I wanted her gift to be more than just sentimental. I wanted it to be truthful, unfiltered, untouched by Wendy's version of our family history. I still hadn't told Sophie what happened. I couldn't. Not yet. She was in her senior year, juggling exams, college decisions, and the usual weight of trying to become an adult. I didn't want to load her down with betrayal, at least not before I gave her something beautiful to hold on to first. So I kept building. Night after night I added music, edited audio, restored color, cropped out the static. It was imperfect, yes, but it was alive. It breathed. It felt like her mother, not just images, but soul. And then I wrote the voiceover. Not a narration from me, but words I imagined Alina would have said, things I'd heard her whisper in Sophie's ear when she thought no one was listening. Words pulled from old birthday cards, scribbled notes, and the back of Polaroid photos. I didn't tell Wendy about the video, but I saw the curiosity flicker in her every time I locked the office door or slipped a flash drive into my coat pocket. She was watching me, waiting, trying to anticipate what I was planning, but she couldn't follow, because I wasn't planning something against her. I was building something around her, a wall, a shield, a story she would never be a part of again. The night before Sophie's birthday, I finished the video. It was just under 10 minutes. Short, simple, and heavy. The final frame faded into black with a soft whisper from Alina. "I'll always love you, even from here." I watched it once, alone. Then I transferred it to a password-protected flash drive and locked it in the safe deposit box, along with a printed letter addressed to Sophie. This is your mother's voice, the one they tried to silence, the one you deserve to hear. Never let anyone decide which memories you're allowed to keep. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of nerves, but because for the first time in weeks, I felt ready. I didn't need confrontation anymore. I didn't need to scream. I had built something stronger than anger. I had built truth. The next day, I gave Sophie her birthday gifts like any other dad would. Books, a necklace, a few cards from relatives. Wendy smiled through it all, playing the supportive stepmother role like a seasoned actress. I said nothing. After the party, when things had quieted and Wendy had gone upstairs to shower, I asked Sophie if she had a few minutes. "Yeah," she said, curling up on the couch, barefoot, still glowing from the attention of the day. "What's up?" I handed her a small box with a note taped on top. Just her name and a little heart. "What's this?" "A story," I said. "Your real one." She looked at me, confused, but didn't press. She opened the box and pulled out a second flash drive, a decoy, identical to the one in the deposit box. "Watch it alone," I said. "And take your time. There's a letter in there, too." She nodded, sensing the weight of my voice. That evening, she disappeared into her room. An hour later, I heard her cry. Not the kind of cry that came from shock or sadness, but something deeper, softer, a release, the sound of a dam breaking. I didn't go to her, I let her have that moment. Wendy came downstairs later, asking if everything was all right. "She's just overwhelmed," I said. "It was a big day." Wendy smiled, relieved. She thought the storm had passed, that we'd all moved on, But that smile would vanish soon, because Sophie was about to learn the truth. And when she did, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Sophie didn't come down for breakfast. She always came down, even if it was just for coffee. But that day, her door stayed closed. Wendy noticed, of course. "She's probably tired," she said with a shrug, pouring almond milk into her cereal. "It was a big day yesterday." I just nodded. I didn't say a word. At 11:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. One word. "Come upstairs." It was from Sophie. Wendy was still in the kitchen when I stood up. "I'm going to check on her," I said. I didn't wait for a response. When I opened her door, I saw the flash drive on her nightstand. Her laptop was open, paused on the last frame of the video, Alina's face, smiling so warmly it made my chest ache. Sophie was sitting cross-legged on her bed, a box of tissues beside her, eyes red and glassy. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, in a whisper, she tried to erase her. I sat on the edge of her bed, unsure of whether I should speak. My throat was thick. "You knew?" I nodded. "How long?" "Since the tapes went missing." Her mouth tightened. "So, they're really gone?" I didn't have to answer. My silence said everything. She looked away. "I don't get it. Why would she do that?" And there it was. The question that shattered the illusion Wendy had spent years building. I could have given her a dozen answers. I could have said it was jealousy, control, selfishness. But instead, I said the only thing that mattered. Because she wanted to be your only mother. Sophie wiped her eyes, slow and deliberate. "But she's not." "No," I said. "She never was." Sophie reached for the flash drive. "This is all I have left of her?" "No," I said, placing my hand gently over hers. "You are what's left of her. This," I tapped her chest, "this is what she gave you, her voice, her strength, her love. The video just reminded you." She nodded slowly. I left her to sit with that. Later that evening, I heard the front door open. Sophie walked into the kitchen, still in her pajamas, and stood across from Wendy. And I watched. I watched as the girl I raised became a woman in a single breath. "You threw away the tapes, didn't you?" Wendy blinked, caught completely off guard. "What?" "Sophie, what are you talking about?" "I know what you did," Sophie said, voice trembling but steady. "You went through them, one by one, and you destroyed them. Don't lie." I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Sophie snapped. "From my own mother? From memories that weren't about you?" The kitchen went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to vanish. Wendy tried to step closer. "I made a mistake." "No," Sophie said, stepping back. "You made a choice." And then she did something I'll never forget. She pulled the flash drive out of her hoodie pocket and held it up. "This is all I needed. You took the rest. You don't get to speak for her. Not anymore." And with that, she walked past Wendy. Calm. Final. Wendy looked at me, desperate, expecting me to jump in, defend her, smooth it over. But I didn't, because I was done. Later that night, Sophie came into my office and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was something she'd written. Not for me, for Alina. I won't read the whole thing here, that's hers to keep. But the last line said everything. "I remember you now, not because of what he told me, but because of what she tried to take away." That was her revenge. And mine too. Not through rage, not through violence, but by holding on to the truth and shining a light so bright It burned the lie to ash. Wendy moved out 3 weeks later. No drama, no explosive fight. Just a quiet Saturday morning with cardboard boxes, folded clothes, and a moving truck idling in the driveway. She didn't cry. Neither did I. We'd said everything that needed to be said without words. And that was the most painful part for her, I think, realizing that she wasn't leaving because I hated her. She was leaving because she'd made herself impossible to trust. Sophie didn't say goodbye. I didn't ask her to. After Wendy left, the house felt lighter. Not empty, just clear. Like someone had finally opened the windows after years of holding their breath. I took time off work, focused on home, on healing, on Sophie. We started going through old photo albums together. The few that hadn't been destroyed. I told her stories she'd never heard. About her mother's weird obsession with blueberry muffins, her off-key karaoke obsession, the time she tried to wallpaper the kitchen and ended up glued to the floor. We laughed, we cried, and slowly the weight lifted. One night, Sophie came into my room and handed me something. It was the flash drive. "I want you to keep it," she said. "You protected it. You brought her back to me. I'm ready to carry her now. But I want to know you're carrying her too." I held it in my palm for a long time. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me who I was before I let guilt, silence, and someone else's insecurity try to erase me. In the months that followed, I started writing again. Not for work, for myself. I began documenting everything. Alina's story, Sophie's milestones, even the darkness Wendy brought into our lives, not to punish, not to publish, just to remember, because memory is sacred. And silence, if left unchecked, becomes erasure. I never told the full story to anyone outside our family. I didn't need to. But I will say this to anyone listening, especially those who've been told to move on before they're ready. You're allowed to protect your grief. You're allowed to honor your past. And anyone who tries to erase your story to make room for theirs never loved you. Not really. Because love doesn't compete with memory. It adds to it. And in the end, that's what I've learned. Alina lives on. Not just in footage or photos or old cassette tapes. She lives on in Sophie's smile, and in the man I had to become to protect her legacy. If someone's ever tried to erase a part of your past or rewrite your truth, drop a candle in the comments. Let them know. Memory is power, and some stories refuse to stay buried.